Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello and welcome to the Prose and Cons podcast, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like prose and a few times we do feel like cons. Here today is Matan Elul. I am your host for today, and I have two lovely gentlemen here with me today. On the left side of the screen, I have Paddy.
Hello, I'm Paddy Boylan. I am a writer, technical writer, editor, and creative writing teacher. And just recently, I was working in some games booths for SXXW, South by Southwest, spruiking some excellent little indie games. And that was a lot of fun. But mostly I write. Mostly I write.
Nice. And down south at the bottom of my Zoom gallery is the one and only Phoenix.
Hello. I'm a tired boy today, but just
You're doing great.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Phoenix. I'm the founder of Bent Light Writing. It's an international freelance editing house that puts emphasis on authenticity reading. Apart from that, I'm a writer. I do writing and stuff. And I'm actually, fun fact, I'm a good chunk of the way through, about halfway through a diploma course for teaching English as a foreign language. So I'm going to be starting down that route as well. I love languages very much. It's very fun.
2 English teachers in Precipice. 2.
Okay,
that gives us credentials.
We should
no one can question our credentials now.
That's awesome.
Fun fact, actually, last night I played a tabletop role-playing game with some friends, and it was the second time ever I'd played in Spanish. It still is like near the end of 4 hours of that. My brain is just like,
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
Are you gonna like lapse into Spanish midway through the podcast at some point?
I actually already almost did.
Great. I love that.
We should do a Spanish episode just for fun. I'll get Daniela and maybe. Anyway, my name is Matan. I'm the host. Like I said, I'm also an English teacher. I teach high school. I teach them a lot of grammar, which they absolutely despise. And when I'm not torturing young minds, I write horror and fantasy, and I'm 1/6 of Precipice Fiction, along with these other two who are also 1/6 of Precipice Fiction. Okay, today we're going to discuss something that, can I call it controversial? I don't know. We're going to take maybe one of the most popular advices that authors get, and we might do a little bit of a pushback on it. I'm still not sure where these other two lads stand on the topic. I'm going to find out with you guys. But first, Phoenix, Paddy, what have you been reading? What have you been watching? Anything good?
Yes.
Well,
okay, Phoenix, go.
Yeah, actually, I finished listening to, I almost said The Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, by Margaret Atwood? Is that her name?
I think so. I
believe so. That I thoroughly enjoyed that, every minute of that book. Like that book pulled me in so fast and held me all the way up until the end. Like, incredible.
What is it about,
incredible
Phoenix, for those of you who have been living under a rock?
Yeah, it's about so you start in on, it's a dystopian society book, and you start in on a character who is clearly in a very strict space, and there's this big question about, because there's talk of roles in a society and stuff like this, so you're kind of wondering what's their role, what's going on here. There's this natural curiosity that grips you right from the start. And then you find out that the shift to this dystopian society was actually fairly recently, because then there's this part, the other kind of half of the story is a reflection on the life before that the main character was what they are now. And it's this unraveling of what this dystopian society looks like, how it functions, and this character's role in the society, which is a unique one. And then just slowly, this slow bleed of what the rest of the world looks like and the state of the rest of the world and stuff. Excellent book.
You see, I heard, look, I'm a bit of a softie, and I heard that the content of that book and the TV show as well are a little difficult. Would you call it that way? Are they a bit extreme?
I would definitely say, like, I could see I wouldn't like it wouldn't inspire me to give a content warning necessarily, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone came back if someone was sensitive in a particular area. I wouldn't be surprised if someone could get triggered by that material. Just like yeah, it is like it does highlight some areas that are pretty unfortunate in terms of like women's suffrage in the world and stuff like that. And it basically it takes this dystopian society and uses it as a tool to highlight things that are
Mm.
present in our society. So there are some hectic things. Also, yeah, there is violence and stuff.
Patty, you wanted to add something about the
I,
Handmaid's Tale?
I personally actually stopped at season two. I could come back to it, but there were some things that I found very distressing personally, and
Mm.
it's a wonderful
Um,
series, really, really good. But some certain things gave me the bad feels really strongly, and I was like, nah, this is a bit much for me right now. It's something I'd like to
mhm.
return to, but yeah, it's it's heavy stuff
I
in
I
a
did
good
hear
way, but
something. I did hear something along those lines by people who had a lot of
Uh,
admiration for the show, but kind
oh
of said
yeah,
like, you know what? For me
yep.
personally, I'd rather not watch it.
It's all in the
But
service of
okay.
like a very like Phoenix said, good
look, that's
message,
life.
but
Sometimes life has
yeah,
worse to throw at you. So
yeah.
I guess, yeah.
But yeah, so I haven't seen the show. I listened to the audiobook. So
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
curious to see what they do.
Cool. Thank you, Phoenix. Patty, have you maybe watched something a bit more pleasant or played something a bit more pleasant?
Yeah, so I've played Judero, which is an absolutely wonderful Judero. It is a stop motion video game based in
Whoa.
Scottish. Yeah, I can't imagine how long this thing
That
would have
is
taken
cool.
these people. Based in Scottish folklore and mythology. It
Oh,
is an absolute fever dream of a game. It's deeply strange in the way that only stop motion can be.
nice.
If you know what I mean with claymation, it can be real weird. But I found it
Wow.
absolutely charming. I've wish listed it. I'm going to buy it. Judero is wonderful. And I also saw Uncut Gems, the film Uncut Gems not too
Hey,
long ago. Oh
Adam
man.
Sandler with a
Oh, he's
beard.
so
Yeah.
good. He's so like I'm someone that doesn't have a lot of time for Adam Sandler's comedic roles. I'm like, okay, buddy, how old are we?
Did you like it?
Uncut Gems, I loved it.
Okay,
I
nice.
absolutely
Yeah.
loved it. Um,
So Adam Sandler he's what? He's a diamond merchant. He gets with the wrong people. Kevin Garnett is there for some
Yeah, but
reason.
it's all by his own hand. It's brilliantly written. The
A
writing in this is
classic
so
tragedy.
good. He undoes himself in at every turn, and the whole thing is like robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that's the whole film. And he
Nice.
gets, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a very stressful movie. It's a
Uncut
very good
Gems.
film. Uncut Gems, I recommend. You've seen it, right,
Very
Matan?
cool. I have. I am something of an Adam Sandler
I know.
follower. I'm
We
not
don't
gonna say
hold that
fan
against
because
you.
I don't love.
Aficionado.
Yeah, I don't love everything he does, but I kind of watch it. So who am I to complain? Like I'm. Anyway, some of his stuff are very nice. Okay, I have read a play, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. An Irish play by Brian Friel or Friel. James, where are you when I need you? And it's an Irish play written in the 1980s, and it actually depicts Ireland about 10 or 15 years before the Great Famine, which happened in the 19th century. And the play is called Translations. And what's really cool about it is that it basically shows the life of a small Irish village as the English are coming to map the area. Part of the British Empire's desire to have better supervision on what's happening is they need to have clear, updated maps. The problem is that all the area, the surrounding area of the village is all named in Irish names. And the British are like, we don't understand these Irish names, so we're just going to change them from whatever you call them, like Ballybeg, to something like small town. Basically English. The
Yeah.
whole play is in English, but half of the characters are actually speaking Irish. To the audience or to the reader, it's all English. So we understand everybody while they don't understand each other. So a lot of comedy, a lot of
Oh.
tragedy,
Oh.
and some really heartbreaking stuff by the end of it. But I think it's really great. Kind of reminds me of the play by Arthur Miller. Again, don't prosecute me if I'm getting this wrong, but Black Comedy, where there's a lights out, all the characters are blind, but in reality there is light on the stage, so we the audience can see, but the characters cannot. So
I
they
love that.
bump into each other.
I
Mm.
love that.
So translations is great with that, is that everybody kind of speak English, but in character they don't understand each other, it's quite a fun play to read, especially if you're Phoenix, you're learning a bunch of languages. You can definitely sympathize with that feeling that some of the characters are experiencing. Yeah, highly recommended. It's pretty short, guys. Plays are short, really.
Yeah. What a great
Bite-sized.
concept. I would love to see that.
All right, and we are diving into our topic. Gonna start with a tiny introduction. Back in 2018, when I was just starting my writing career, I was a member of the New South Wales Writers Centre. You two were also members, right, at some point, of the New South Wales Writers Centre in Sydney, and they had that thing where you can pay $100, and in return, a professional editor would read the first 10 pages of your book and tell you what they think in a face-to-face meeting. Sounds like a good bargain. That's exactly what I did. So I sit with this very nice editor lady after giving her the first 10 pages of my manuscript. And, she's kind of, giving me some compliments, giving me some criticism. But she also gave me like a 14-page worksheet titled Show, Don't Tell. And boy, I got the message, all right? It was really important to her that I understood the concept of show, don't tell. I think I still have the pages somewhere hidden with examples and stuff. And that's what this podcast is going today. Writers, listeners, you probably got this advice too. If you Google writing tips for beginners, I can vouch that 99% of these websites on their list are going to have the saying show, don't tell. We ourselves have done an episode on show, don't tell. That's how good that advice is. Today, we're also going to talk about, at least I think, that sometimes new writers, especially, they want so badly to improve, they kind of take it to the other extreme, to the detriment of their writing. And hopefully we're going to discuss today instances where show don't tell is not actually always this biblical commandment that you must follow to your death, but something that you got to use sparingly and only in the right occasion as to not harm other aspects of your book. But before we jump into it, guys, would any of you be kind enough to give me your interpretation of what does show don't tell even mean?
Well, this is one of the weirdest rules because I remember when I first got my first show don't tell note. It was with the first book I had edited, which was a children's book. And yeah, the editor came back, was like, show don't tell this. And I could see that her like looking at her line versus my line, I was like, yeah, it is more engaging, but I could not tell you why. And I was like trying to change lines, and I really couldn't understand what was changing between the line, other than like, yeah, obviously it's different, it feels more engaging, but I couldn't really, it was this very ephemeral note for me. I was like, I don't quite understand how to change what makes a showing line versus a telling line. And until now, it's like I have a very acute sense for it. And but anyway, a good example I think of show don't tell is one area that I like to use it a lot is with attributions, or to at least break up attributions. So instead of saying blah 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 blah, they said angrily. So that would be a telling attribution. You're just telling the audience they said it in an angry way. I like to replace the attribution sometimes with an action beat instead and be like, what does anger look like? And it might just be like, so you give the dialogue like man, I hate lobster. And then I would just say like he wrapped his fingers firmly on the table or something. And that would be the action beat instead. Just like, this is what the anger is manifesting as. I'm showing the reader the anger as opposed to telling them outright, this is anger. It leaves some room for interpretation as to what his exact emotion is. But at the very least, it's like, yeah, I'm showing what the character's doing as opposed to telling them how the character's feeling. That's one example. It's not really a definition.
That's good. Okay, so you guys both know Anton Chekhov of Chekhov's gun fame?
Yes.
Yeah. He said, don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass, which I think is pretty nice. Yeah.
Yes.
Chekhov with the bangers.
Hey,
Chekhov's gun. Get it? I didn't intend to do that. But
I
I'll
do
take
get
credit
it.
for
I got it.
Yeah. It's if you can, I mean, there's not really much I can add to what Phoenix said. Yeah, if you can tell someone, great, but showing is just always more engaging and interesting and immersive, and it brings us into the scene rather than. That's all the difference between like, reading a vivid scene and like reading a shopping list. We don't just want the
Ah,
information, we want a picture
Absolutely.
painted. I got one more quote as well. I'm going to attribute this to Andrew Stanton. If I got this wrong, apologize to all concerned. He's the head of Pixar, and in a TED talk, he said, I'm paraphrasing, something like, "Don't give the audience four, give them 2 + 2." And
Nice.
it's like you can just give them the information, or you can give them, the
Yeah.
characters. You can show them getting a little more angry over time. You can show them like getting slowly frustrated, and that's usually stronger than just saying they were getting
Very
frustrated.
nice.
if you're introducing a character and you wanted, it's instead of opening with narration saying so and so was depressed or something, instead you open with a scene with them sitting alone on a park bench and the rest of
Yeah,
the world walking them by and they're just staring at the ground.
totally.
And yeah,
I
you
I
show them a
imagined that when
scene
you
and
said it.
Absolutely.
people attach meaning to it and it's very easy to put an idea in to incept an idea into someone's mind.
Yep, yep. I think that's great. And again, I just want to preface this by saying show don't tell is good advice. There's a reason it is so popularly offered to new writers, old writers too. But what I want to discuss today is really what is the cost of showing? Because let me take this to video game terminology for a second. If you press the sprint button, you usually have an energy bar that is slowly depleting the longer you press it. Ideally, you would like to sprint through the whole game. You'd finish it faster. But the mechanics of the game kind of don't let you just press the sprint bar the whole time. And I believe that when we show, there is a cost. And specifically, the cost is something like this. When you are depicting anything in a novel, in a short story, you need to consider how much time you are taking to illustrate that action or to explain that is happening. Now, to say Emma was angry, 3 words, but to say Emma rapped her knuckles on the table while biting her lower lip and glaring at Tom, that took you slightly longer. Another way to term what's happened here are 2 terms called time compression and time dilation. Time compression is basically when a long amount of time is compressed to less, let's call it page space. An example of time compression is like saying in the winters, Phoenix would visit his grandma for over 10 years until one day he stopped. We basically took a span of 10 years, that's a bit extreme, and we put it in one sentence. Time dilation is kind of the zoom in, almost like this putting everything in slow motion. You're taking your time to focus on the details. Every time you are showing, you are inherently applying time dilation to your story. Not always, but a lot of the time, that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to depict the story action by action, beat by beat. You're going to have to talk about the eyebrows. You're going to have to talk about the sweat on the forehead, exactly what they see. And even though that's beautiful, that can also lead to reader fatigue. Now, if you're writing a short story, maybe that's not the end of the world. But if you're writing a novel and you keep asking your reader to focus on all these little details, I think the cost for that is reader fatigue. And basically, you're sacrificing a lot of the momentum of the story, especially if you're writing a big epic and you have a lot of plot beats and plot points you want to get to.
Yeah.
So time dilation, time compression.
One way I've heard it figured, I think I might
Yep.
have even mentioned this on the podcast before, so I got nothing new, but someone described it in terms of like, imagine you got cinematography in a film, and sometimes it's nice to have a scene where you really focus on little details and you focus on like maybe there's blood dripping from the doorknob and there's a shattered window, and those scenes are kind of like just like a montage of different close-ups, but you can't do that for the whole movie. Like at some point you got to have some jump cuts. At some point you got to move things along. It's choosing where to linger the camera, and showing necessarily takes the camera. It means that the camera's lingering for a while you show. And if that were a movie, you'd just be like, boy, I'm checking my watch. I want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, after long enough.
Yep.
It's like the well, like showing or not showing. Wow, in my mind, my mind's really having a hard time compartmentalizing showing and telling right now. I'm flipping them a lot. Telling is really great in novels and stuff for scene setting. Like will give you a small slap of history and like set the picture of the scenery and stuff. And then it's kind of like, and now let's see what our hero is doing. And you zoom in, and then
Yeah.
you come in on their thoughts about whatever moment is currently playing out, and you're dropped into you slowly come down into their senses. And once you're in their senses and are taking in the trees and, as Matan brought up, the eyebrows, I I really
Yeah, that stuck out to me as well. Like, what are the
yeah,
eyebrows doing, Matan?
yeah. You
Eyebrows
gotta
are
talk about the
really fun.
eyebrows.
Yeah, I
Like
guess so.
they're so important.
Otherwise,
Then you're
what
showing.
expression do they have? Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly.
Please continue.
Then you're showing once you're in that sensory space.
How many times do you feel like you've received a shopping list of what a character is wearing
Yeah.
in a book?
And so often I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't need to know this. I don't really need to know.
You
I often feel like even when I hear that like a character has brown eyes and brown hair, often I'm just like, I don't.
I don't
Fine.
care.
Yeah.
Is
Sometimes
it
it's
relevant?
great and necessary, but sometimes
But a lot of the times you can just say he was dressed in rich garments and move on. You don't have to describe the silk sash around I don't know, vermilion coat. You don't need that necessarily. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you kind
yeah,
of make a
sometimes you
point.
do, and that I guess that's so part of
I
this
mean,
is like
there
it's
is
so difficult to
storytelling.
know when to
Yeah.
do this and when not to, and there's
Uh,
so much that's really hard to teach.
This is also where a lot of confusion comes from, at least for me, when I first started getting show don't tell notes, is it's like, okay, you think showing, that means helping the reader see what's there.
yeah.
And so you think like, all right, I'm telling the reader what the person's wearing, that's showing because I'm showing them what they look like. Like that's showing, right? And that's kind of where it gets confusing. That would actually be more of a telling thing because you're describing what they're wearing as opposed to, I don't know, maybe it comes up more organically in another way. Like that's one that kind of blurs the line a little bit, but it is
Yeah.
more telling than showing to tell
Mm.
someone what someone's wearing, as opposed to maybe waiting when if even one of their features or one of their
Yep.
piece of clothing naturally comes up for a reason in the plot. That would be more of a
Yes.
showing
Yep.
way of divulging what they look like.
I
One
agree.
thing you could do, if someone is dressed really well, you could have all eyes in the room turned to them, and you could have hushed whispers and people just like their
But
eyes
then it has-
sparkling at this wonderful garment, and
significance.
that's
Yeah.
and but that's
That is
that's how
right.
you could show that, yeah.
What I'm trying to say also, I agree with what you guys are saying. It can have meaning, but but the point is that what I'm trying to really hint at is that showing has a cost. You are paying in currency, and the currency you're paying with is pacing, momentum, and literally how many words you require to get your point across. And if you're writing a book that ballooned to 150,000 words, you got to consider, do I need a scene showing that he's a sharp-tongued man, because he's negotiating in the market for a cheaper price for the fish? That is also showing. You could just say that this character is sharp and that he always gets what he wants.
Yep.
But you could just say it. You can just say it and move on to what really matters.
Yep. And I guess we might have already even said this, but whether or not you want to tell or show how much time you want to devote is probably depending on how important the character is, how important that is in the story. If it's a minor character, maybe don't have the whole scene, the marketplace scene where he's haggling. You can just say this minor character is good. But if it's the main character of the story, maybe then you want to have the extended marketplace scene.
Yeah. Can you think of instances in TV shows, movies, books where telling was actually beneficial to the book? It could be just a time compression.
In Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, I've mentioned this in a podcast, definitely, but I love where she just goes like later at Wolf Hall, and following like a beautiful passage of description and all the stuff, but then she's like, nah, they just move. They don't get on their horses and ride and look out into the sunset and ride for 3 days. And like, no, they're just there because travel is often like boring and we don't need it.
Okay,
So
she
later
does
that
an
day,
incredible she does an incredible amount of telling also with the
Yes.
way she describes characters, but she's got a cheat code. And her cheat code is that she's
Up,
not
up,
the
down,
one
down,
doing
left, right, up. No, sorry.
IDDQD.
She just does that every time before she writes.
Oh, good.
Fireball.
My point is that Hilary Mantel doesn't do the telling. It's Thomas Cromwell who is doing the telling.
Oh.
He is the one telling you that that lady was pretty but had a gambling addiction. He's telling you, not the
Yeah.
writer.
Yeah.
You're just hearing it from his mouth.
And so you're being shown Cromwell telling you. You're totally right. Actually, you're totally right. She does, and it makes mm, mm. Mentel. Oh, Mentel, you've done it again.
Yeah, she's
But
fantastic.
that is still telling. Like, is it just like
It is.
it's a narrative form though? Like they have I just started Wolf Hall, but I have not gotten very far.
I think it's telling. We can give excuses for it, but it is blatant telling. She's
It's
telling
telling.
you that King Henry was handsome. She's telling you that he was a strong, fierce man. More often than showing you scenes of him being strong, she actually does tell you. Like he didn't take no for an answer. His underlings sucked up to him. She doesn't mind because she's got so much story to tell. She's got so many
Mm.
important things that need to happen. She does a tremendous amount of showing too. When she sits
Yes.
down, her protagonist with the ambassador of the Holy Roman Empire, for example,
Yeah.
there's so much showing happening in their conversations. But she's also balancing that with a healthy amount of telling.
Yes. I think one issue with just telling is if it's something important, we kind of just have to take the author's word for it. It's like the let's say the negotiation went wonderfully and everyone agreed. Okay, well, fine, but like, did it? Like, tell me the details. Oh, show me rather. Can't say tell. That's very confusing. Show me the details. So it's like you kind of want evidence for the thing. And the rest of going on about Healy Mantel, like I think she gives evidence where necessary as well. Yeah, that's something a point I want to make. Like you gotta show evidence for the important stuff. I think even if you tell later on, at some point you gotta show us. We gotta experience firsthand. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like that was the
Yeah,
most
it does.
rambly possible way I could have said that, but there it is, and it's recorded now. So
No, it's recorded.
It is
It's too
recorded,
late.
yeah.
One of the reasons why showing is usually highlighted as like you have to show, don't tell, apart from it just being like usually more engaging and stuff like that, is it is in a sense the more important of the two. And I only mean that in the sense that if for example, I feel like showing shows up a bit more once the medium starts extending and once you have more runway. But if you're writing in a shorter medium, if you have to trim the fat, usually the showing is what gets, or the telling is what gets trimmed.
no, that
So
you
for
mean the showing is
example,
what gets trimmed, right?
no, the telling is what gets trimmed. If you're
Okay.
shrinking the medium, you want to distill down to the showing moments usually, because for example,
Oh, I see.
I
I see.
start, yeah,
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, basically you basically leaving the important stuff that is shown in detail rather than have all the fluff around it.
because if
Yeah.
you have less word count, then you're challenged to, okay, I need to engage the reader faster. I need to hook them in. And because you're like Paddy said, like, all right, show us the evidence. That's because in that context, the evidence is important. Maybe it's a plot point you've been building. Maybe it's something that we do need evidence of. And because of its importance, it's better to show it because it's like, all right, this is a moment that's worth showing to the reader as opposed to glossing over in a period. So if you, for example, I learned using children's books, like that was where I started. And so the showing note was way more prevalent because I'm working with a 500 word count. So
Yep.
it's like every line is more or less going to be showing. You don't have very much telling space at all because you need every line to really hit and show something.
Real quick, Banton, I know you had a
Yeah.
point, but sometimes I think there are definitely times where you can take a big show and reduce to a small tell as well. You could
Yep.
take a big show and just be like, if you can reduce that, then that's efficient. Sometimes.
I want to
Sometimes.
I want to lead to my next point, and I want both of you to put your editor caps for a second.
All right.
I'm going to give you a
Asking it.
line, a single line, and you tell me if you would have categorized it leaning towards the show or leaning towards the tell.
Is
or
this a mini
absolutely
game?
a tell. I'm sorry. No, it's
Is
not
this-
a mini. I mean, everything is a game. Life is a game, okay, Pat?
Okay.
It is
He
game.
can't help it,
It is
Paddy.
game.
He can't.
I know. It's great.
It's a famous
I
line,
know,
all
me too.
right? Ready?
Yeah.
Short line. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
That's a tell.
Sharon or tell now?
That's a tell. What do you reckon, Phoenix?
Yeah. No, I would say that's a tell.
Are you familiar with that line?
No.
Great. That's the first line in a novel.
Hmm.
That's the first line in a novel by Stephen King, the Dark Tower series. It's book number 1, Gunslinger. And the fact that he uses a tell to begin is vital because it tells you, okay, this is the story. This is what this is
Yeah.
about.
That's a
It
great example of
anchors
a
you.
tell. Yeah.
But
It's
it's a
punchy.
very engaging tell, and
Yeah.
that's
That's my
why.
Yeah.
And that's my point. If it had started with he collected a handful of sand and carried on to the next vigorous step, looking at the sinking horizon of the dark red sun as the far silhouette was getting further, he loaded his gun and kept running
This is
forward.
really good,
Soon he
Matan.
would reach his target. Okay, maybe that could be beautiful, but I think that clarity, especially in 2024, clarity
Mm.
is interesting. I need to feel like what I don't know are things that I'm supposed not to know. I cannot feel as if I'm misunderstanding. Does that make sense?
hmm
I need to feel like the things I'm not aware of as a reader are things that I'm not supposed to be aware of, rather than me just not understanding because I'm not fast enough, because I'm not keen enough, because the sentence is too complicated for me. The faster your reader understands where they are and what they want, or what your characters want, the higher the chance they'll be engaged and invested in the story. That's how I feel. And that's where telling, to an extent, is essential.
Mm.
So I would also say the showing line that you gave for that book, that would be the way to go if it was more important to build the setting of, if the desert, for example, was maybe more important to the setting or something, then you take the time to, I want to drop them right into the desert and engage their senses
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
But in this case, the priority is constructing the relationship between chaser and or runner and pursuer
Yep.
and building this tonal dynamic right off the bat. So
Yep.
instead of being engaged sensually,
Yeah.
Yeah. Sensorially.
um, yeah, okay,
Sounds
they
sounds
both
good.
work. Yeah, um, I'm being engaged instead just with the dynamic right off the bat. So that's what the author's chosen to highlight. That's more plot significant to their book, I would imagine. So yeah, it's a style choice. It's an artistic choice in that case, I would say.
Mm.
Yep. So I think that's why I think you can definitely go the other way, like Phoenix said. And it's what matters. Are you writing a piece that is more about, like Paddy, me and you discussed cyberpunk before the podcast
Mhm.
started. If what matters to you is to showcase the world, maybe that's what you want. You want to start with a scene of like, he plugged the cable into his neck,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
pumped some sort of substance into his arm and
While
saw a
outside,
video.
the sound of Tokyo hyperpop
Yeah,
blared
you could
from
do
floating
that.
speakers. Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely have to decide. But I think that to start a story with too much showing, I mean, let's be honest, you need to hook the reader.
Mm.
Unless you're showing something that is, an event of great interest, something dramatic, someone being killed, something being found. I still think the telling is so important because it really anchors the reader into the stakes of the story. And from the way Stephen King started his book, you immediately know who, what, and you kind of almost know the why. He's going to chasing the desert because he wants to catch this person, and even the use of the language. He literally said the man in black. I mean, I don't want to be stereotypical, but that kind of does paint a, a dark antagonist. Black is the man in black. If we go back to westerns, it's kind of the bad guy. The man in black is the bad guy. The gunslinger. It's very western like. So with very few words he very economically paints the picture, the good cowboy and the bad cowboy and all that stuff.
Yep. Also, it reminds me of Charles Dickens's Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, blah, 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 blah. And that's how he begins the
Exactly.
book. And it's
It's
literally
telling.
just telling you a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Marley
Yeah,
was dead is such a good first line.
that's a great line.
Oh, and that's the
But
Christmas Carol,
there
by
is
the way.
no, there's definitely no one like open with showing, open with telling. Either can be used to hook the reader immediately.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
Yep, yep, yep.
and it just depends how you want to hook the reader. In the case of The Handmaid's Tale, she opens with I can't remember if the exact line, but I know this first scene is a showing scene. And it's because she wants to do this slow. It depends on if you want a grand like kind of more context and dial in on sensory, or you want to
Mm.
like in with Margaret in our Margaret's case, she wanted to slow bleed the greater context. So she started with a close-up sensorial scene,
Yeah.
And the hook is wanting to know what's going on.
Yes.
So then she slow feeds, like drip feeds that to you
Yep.
as you go.
Yep.
If she started with telling, the whole structure of the story really kind of falls apart there.
Yeah.
I agree. I think we can come up with a lot of examples where showing is a great way to hook your reader, especially if you're working on the mystery angle of you will find out what's happening. Trust me.
When you
me,
want to
you'll
give
find out.
clues. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
But let's do another line. This one is from a very, very famous book. I promise you both are familiar. Very short line. Okay. Editor cap ready. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much.
Lord of the Rings.
For Phoenix.
Nice. Yeah, okay. Is
Is
that showing or telling?
It's showing.
Is
It's
it?
a little of both,
No,
actually.
I would say it's
A little both, yeah.
telling.
What does it show you, Paddy? What does it show you that they're proud to tell that they're normal? Let's go into that for a second. What was showed to you?
I mean, it's a
What
bit
was
of a
shown to you?
it's a bit of a like cheat code.
It's a bit of a
but,
showing.
I mean, she could have just said they
Yeah,
were
it's
normal,
like a
but
hybrid.
instead she's showing you what they like to say about themselves, and it's a hair's breadth away from telling. But I think that end part's a show. The beginning's tell, where it's like this is their location. It's kind of borderline. I'm gonna say it's a show.
Yeah,
But
it's a borderline
could
one.
go either way.
It feels showy because it's an introduction to the character, so it's like it's giving I kind of lost what I was gonna say. But the showing alternative would be having them interact with the world or having them interact with another character where they say something that makes them proud, and we see kind of what that changes in the character's demeanor, what that like how it changes the scene. And that would be such a heavy-handed, unnecessary way to do this. Like in this case, just tell me. And it's a very engaging line. Like
It's a clever telling. It's a clever telling.
It is.
Clever tell.
Yeah, it is a
It
clever
has
tell.
that
It's
extra
quirky.
meaning.
It's a beautiful tell.
It's a tell
And I
wrapped
think
in a
that-
show. How about that?
I want to maybe, I think my main beef with showing is that I feel like, because like Patty said, there is a bit of showing here. But my main problem with showing, especially with new writers, is that to them showing is basically the slow motion. It's basically I'm going to write a whole paragraph explaining how he's starving by the fact that he's licking the plate out of and eating every crumb. And that's my problem, is that can be good, but you can show without time dilation. You can show in little words. A lot of writers think that you need to write a paragraph about how her golden hair cascaded past her pale ears and reached the nuke, all that stuff to say that someone is beautiful. But you're now being economic with two things. First, your word count. Second, your reader's attention and time. Readers nowadays, even more than any other time in history, you're competing for them. Okay, you're competing for their attention. You're competing with a host of things, from Dragon Ball Sparking Zero to just Twitter. I don't know what they're doing. And I think that when we kind of take the privilege of overshowing, look, I'm not trying to destroy literature as a beautiful medium, okay? We still need to have those paragraphs.
I think literature is going to be just fine, Matan. You're good.
You get my point. Just get to the point sometimes. Get to the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so alternative, so that whole scene that I described with the Dursleys like being super heavy-handed. Now, I would do that. I would do a showing scene around that if the series was about the Dursleys and their relationship to their pride. If that was something that was going to be explored heavily throughout the book, I would, instead of saying that line, I'd be more inclined to construct a scene around their pride and stuff like that.
Because
it's not crucial. So it's the economy. So choose your lines, and sometimes it just give them a line, just tell them.
Because really, you could just say like Harry Potter wasn't a wizard, then he went to wizard school, then he was a wizard. Like
anyway, the Dursleys.
The showing's got to happen. Yeah, so you're right. Like if that's the focus, you got to show.
Do you guys? Let's go away a little bit from the showing versus telling thing, and just tell me, what are some of the bad things about overtelling? Where can it get really bad? Forget about the showing, for example. What are the pitfalls of telling too much?
Overtelling? when it just becomes, it's just a list, when it's just a list of things. I mean, I taught, I was saying this to Matan before the podcast began. I taught show don't tell literally this morning to my students. So this is very,
Oh my gosh.
it was very lucky. I'm like, oh, great. I don't need to prep. We read books to escape. Well, not necessarily escape, but we read books that, like, so we're not on the train going to work. So we're not lying in our bed. So we're somewhere else. So we're transported. And when we're just told, like, we're not transported, we're just given information. We could be reading a Wikipedia page. When there's too much telling, there's no flight of fancy, the imagination doesn't move.
So like we've been talking about first lines and stuff, and like every chapter is probably going to be a mixture of telling and showing, and you're going to fluctuate between the two and stuff like that. But like one area where I do feel like overall showing is a great way to start a story. Maybe not like maybe you have some telling mixed in there, but like at the very least, I want a showing centric scene, as in don't open explaining your character to me. I want at least the first chapter or the first few scenes. Usually, I'm gonna say usually because whatever, but like at the very least, put the character in a scenario, have them doing something, let me see them interacting with the world in some way. Because I want to or set a scene within your world to show a bit of the dynamic of the world. And again, telling will be involved in this, but at least the scene is constructed around a moment, or the chapter is constructed around a moment that does play out in real time. So that we can kind of get interested, get a feel for things, as opposed to jumping in with a full, like, just section of telling about the history of a place, the blah, blah, blah of a place, whatever it is, because I'm not yet invested in the place. So I don't really want to read about a place I'm not invested in. I don't have stakes in. I don't have a place in yet.
Totally.
But if I have my place there already, then you've kind of bought yourself some time as an author to, okay, I'm in. I want to know more. Tell me about this place. And then you start the next chapter maybe with The Lies of Loch Lamora. I always come back to this example for Show Don't Tell. Does an excellent job of like, once we're invested in the place and stuff like that, I can't remember the exact start of the book, but then at the start of his chapters, he does give a lot of telling. Like, let me just explain how this part of the city works, or this whatever happened here. And then he drops slowly into a more showing like chapter. But the point is that we're already invested as readers. We already have a place in the world before we bring out the big the big telling tools and start like, let me give you a bunch of information. The information, you want to keep it, it's a general good practice to keep it fairly light until you have kind of a rapport with your reader to where they will just sit down and take straight information about your world and enjoy it as well.
Yeah, that's a good balance. That's a very good balance. So you're saying basically Scott Lynch, right? The writer of The Lies of Loch Lamora.
I believe so. I'm gonna look that up.
It basically starts with the showing as kind of a hook and almost like a demonstration of his writing skills. He's trying to get you to buy his book, and he's starting with this demonstration of his writing capabilities. And once he's got you hooked, he's like, okay, you're in. I got your attention. Let me tell you what this city is about. Let me tell you what's happened. There's been a plague. Most of the kids have died. The ones that survived live with this thief grandmaster who's teaching them how to survive in this plague infested society. And the telling is necessary. And basically, yes, the show not tell. Maybe we should just, I don't want to be cheesy, but maybe it should be show and tell. Accordingly.
Absolutely.
Use both tools to their best, and the ability to balance these two things and do them well. Your showing needs to be good, your telling needs to be good. As we've seen with J.K. Rowling's first line, is that her telling was quite good. It was subversive, it was intelligent, it was interesting, and obviously there are also good showings and bad showings. So do them well and balance them in a way, almost like an accordion, like control the pace of your story according to its needs. I wanted to show you guys what I consider the mother of all showing, which is the beginning of The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss.
Also, yes, author confirmation, Scott Lynch and Margaret Atwood are indeed the authors of.
Thank you.
We were right. We had it.
I'll just read the first three lines of the name of the wind. Just it's really, you guys will be the judge of that. It was night again. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of three parts. The most obvious part was a hollow, echoing quiet, made by things that were lacking. If there had been a wind, it would have sighed through the trees, set the insides creaking on its hooks, and brushed the silence down the road like trailing autumn leaves.
Damn.
He's showing you, what is he showing you? He's showing you, you eventually get to that conclusion, a broken man, a man who has given up on who he used to be. The fact that words have gone, I'm sure people can analyze the hell out of this prologue that Patrick Rothfuss has written, but there's no telling here. He's telling you nothing. He's not telling you who the characters are. He's not telling you what they're doing.
Yeah.
He's telling you where they are at the moment.
Yeah.
But that's about it. It's all sensory. Like Phoenix
Yeah.
said, you have silence, you have leaves in the wind, you
And
have
establishing the tone of the story.
the tone.
It's just setting tone
Mhm.
to begin with. Yeah. Really nice.
And this is where showing and telling gets so confusing because, like I said before, with showing, it's like, okay, I'll show you what the character looks like, but it's really telling because you're just listing off what the character looks like.
Yeah.
This is the same thing where it's like a showing scene, but at the end of the day, it's like, but you're just telling me what the wind is doing. You're telling me what the place is doing. Like
Yeah.
that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
So the difference is tonal as well as it's engaging the senses. It's time dilation. We're in
Yep.
a moment in this
Yep.
place, and it's setting a very, a
And
microcosm.
For anyone that's still not clear on Show Don't Tell, we have done another episode on this actually back in our archive where we go into this on a more
Please
kind of
don't put us
a more
side
beginner
by
level.
side. Like, imagine if they just listened to what Matan said in that episode and what Matan is saying now, and they're like, Matan, you're not reliable. You were singing praise of Show Don't Tell.
No, I'm
and
sure.
now
I'm
you're-
sure you still had some reservations. I'm sure you did. It was always in you.
Ah.
It was
Our
always
stance
inside.
has always been the merit of both. I
Okay.
feel.
That's right.
I think
That's
we're
right.
fine.
I think we're
But we are smarter now. We're faster. We're
Wiser.
stronger.
Yeah.
We're
But we're
We've
also
sold some
infallible. so-
copies.
we have some robotic parts. No, we don't.
How would you do that? First of all, has anyone here read The Name of the Wind?
Oh yeah,
hmm
yeah.
How would you turn that into telling? How would you tell that part? The wind, the silence.
The inn was quiet.
Yeah, yeah. The inn was quiet, but really, this is all about the innkeeper. So
It's the
maybe go
innkeeper,
something
yeah.
more direct, like in an inn on the crossroads, there was an innkeeper who was a miserable bastard.
Yeah.
I would go that direction. I might say like the innkeeper was a broken man. Something like
That's
that.
a little better than what I
yeah.
wrote. Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's the telling, right? The innkeeper was a broken man.
Yeah.
He had forgotten who he used to be.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying here.
So really it is just for those listening, like the difference really is it's like how much space do you want to give it on the page? How
Mhm.
important is this sort of thing? And so there are times to dial in and spread things out and really dive into the like play by play of a moment. And there are times when it's like, yeah, that's not so important right now. Just they were proud of themselves, whatever.
Totally.
And it can be just as engaging either way. And it's just a matter of what's important. What are you trying to do?
Yep. There's no right or wrong. Just don't fall into the trap of just always showing, because that's an advice you get so much. I think it happens to a lot of us. We think
Mhm.
showing is the best bits, and we kind of neglect the telling. Take your time, look at your piece as a whole, and realize what kind of pacing you're going for, what kind of momentum, what's important. Like Phoenix made a very good point about if the story of Harry Potter had been about the Dursleys and their relationship with their neighborhood, yes, you could have started with a very deep showing of how normal, quote unquote, they are. But because the real
Mm.
story is about a young boy going with a stranger on a bike to study magic from other strangers, then that's why you gotta kind of think about it differently.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And take your genre into account. Different genres are going to require like your word count specifically, as well as if you're writing for a visual medium and stuff like that, the way you interact with the way you work with the text is going to be a bit different. Because again, it comes down to that economy of words. How many words are you allowed, and what can you do with them? So if you're writing children's books, yeah, you might be doing a bit more showing in your individual lines. I mean, there's a whole, I mean, children's writing is very different, but just an example.
Totally.
Thank you. Paddy, any last notes?
No, I got nothing. We've said it all. It's all been said.
Thank
There
you
you
guys
go.
so much.
Well
We've
said,
said
guys.
it
Well said.
all.
I just wanted to give you a quote that maybe goes directly the other way.
Ooh.
I did find it on Google. I have no idea who said it, and I apologize. It's on Pinterest. You know, Pinterest doesn't always credit people.
Mm.
But the quote, this uncredited quote, goes like this: "I ignore hints on purpose so you can speak up and be direct like an adult.
I ignore hints
Sometimes.
So
on
ignore
purpose.
hints on purpose.
Sometimes just say what you mean." I think there's a lot of
Yes,
Oh,
I
wow.
understand.
The quote about being
but
direct.
You should have just said
Ah.
what you meant, Matan.
Maybe
No,
we
Yeah,
should use a
just
different
say,
quote.
just tell us, Matan.
Perhaps we need a different quote.
no. You know what?
No, that was good.
I like it. I
Oh
like it.
God. All right. Embarrassing. Okay. Guys, you are lovely. You've been fantastic.
You are lovely.
As
You are
always, you
fantastic.
dispense the best of advices. Phoenix, good luck with your becoming an English teacher.
Oh, thank you.
And Paddy, hopefully next time you teach Show Don't Tell, you'll show some love to the telling, which I'm sure you already do.
I did already, but I'll show a little more. I'll show a little more.
Nice.
We could all stand to show a little more love to the
That's the real takeaway.
Dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Pros and Cons. We hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a review in any platform that you're using to listening to us. If you have any comments or questions, please send them to us. We do answer emails. We might even do a mailbag episode again sometime in the future.
Mhm.
The New Mythic, our anthology of short stories, is still available on a lot of platforms as an audiobook, as an ebook, as a print-on-demand hard copy, if that's what you're into. And finally, stay tuned for news about future projects which are coming towards you, not in time dilation, but in time compression, so they are coming fast.
They're hurtling.
Paddy, please tell us, what are the pros of telling rather than showing?
You can get it said in less than 1,000 words.
Hmm.
And Phoenix, what are the cons of telling rather than showing?
Sometimes you say it in 1,000 words.
It's great. It's great.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.